James Hanisch, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Thank you for giving up some of your Wednesday evening.
Thank you very much. Yep, in lockdown. So here we go.
Yes, I had to double take then and just make sure I actually got the right day. Firstly, time zones mess me around. Don't know what day it is then. And then family things have come along and added to the chaos. So I had to double check that it was Wednesday. But thank you for coming on, mate. Really appreciate it. Anyone doesn't know who you are, would you mind just giving us a brief intro to you, what you're doing now, what you've done previously, and we're going to dive into your experience in the NFL, which is super exciting. So a little bit of background on you, mate.
Sure, yeah. I'll keep it short and sweet. I mean, I grew up in Adelaide, Australia, did an exercise science degree, and then basically kind of interned for like Adelaide Football Club and Port Adelaide Football Club back at home, kind of in the sports science realm. It was just as kind of GPS technology was taken off, so I kind of found my niche in there, and then from there moved to Brisbane Lions football team in Australia as well, obviously. And then was lucky enough to get a call one day to see if I wanted to try the University of Oregon football team. And kind of run the sports science program there. So yeah, didn't know where Oregon was, but
Sounded cool.
So it sounded cool and sounded like a pretty good experience. So yeah, I was engaged but not married at that point, and decided to go over there and try and make it work, and we did. We did get married eventually, but then yeah, and so I had a great time in Oregon. And kind of ran the sports science department there. We helped build a whole facility there as well. Marcus married a performance complex, so yeah, that was fantastic. And then got the opportunity to work at NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles. End up being the director of performance science for them as well. Yeah, which was 6 years, and then now I've actually moved back to Australia. And working for Hawkin Dynamics, kind of force plate performance tech company. Kind of heading up the Asia and Oceania regions. So yeah, really excited to get back to Adelaide and kind of reconnect with friends and family and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just had a third child, so it's great to kind of come back and be around family and kind of start a new challenge as well.
Nice, mate. I've actually got a Brisbane Lions jersey.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, so we went for a little tour around a couple of years ago, and it was when Selwyn Griffith was there. So he sorted me right out with the jersey. So yeah, big fan, of course. So, again, another sport I know nothing about. I did go to a game.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I went to. Well, it wasn't a Brisbane Lions game. It was Gold Coast Suns a couple of years after that. Yeah, it was a day we actually landed in Australia. I'll be honest with you, lasted about 3/4 of the game, and I was gone. I had to go to bed. So, but it was good. Yeah, very much enjoyed.
Oh, I hear that jet lag's a real thing.
Wow, absolutely brutal. Kind of similar to having a baby.
Exactly.
As you
exactly.
know. Yeah, very similar. Very similar. So I'm interested, like I am when people move overseas. What was that transition like going from Oz to the States? And was there anything that you kind of wasn't expecting that you came across, or some things that was a bit of a surprise to you, or a pleasant surprise?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple, right? You have your like professional differences, then also your personal differences. And the personal stuff. I think I listened to Joe Clubb's podcast actually that you had her on, and it was so similar. It was a little bit scary, but just like going to the shopping, and first time I walked in the shops, you've never used any product whatsoever. So, soap, you're like, okay, what soap do I actually like? And just random stuff like that. So that's the side of it that's obviously different. That's probably more culturally different than you realize. And then obviously just the different cultures that are in the US as well, and kind of understanding those cultures. And it's obviously been a pretty turbulent time in the US over the last few years, or last year particularly. So, yeah, just learning about different cultures that way was definitely a huge kind of point of difference that I didn't really anticipate. That ended up being like I'm really, really grateful for being over when I was during kind of the era that we were in, and then kind of how it transitioned into like just some just deep discussion, understanding, and kind of really some great self-reflection on kind of how I was brought up and history and all those kind of things. So that was definitely a huge point of difference. And then professionally, I think, Australia really has that kind of top-down high-performance manager model where everything feeds up into that kind of top of the pyramid. And that's very different in the US. I think, in some places, the medical staff is the, kind of the more department in control. In some places, the strength and conditioning staff are more in control, but it's definitely more siloed in the US than I was used to in Australia. So, which actually made the role really fun, especially moving to Oregon. I was a great bridge between the gap because I kind of learned early on, like you just check that ego at the door and kind of walk in and hope to learn from everyone. And I've always seen the kind of sports scientist as someone underneath everyone that helps lift everyone up and kind of help push each other to like use information and kind of develop each other and grow as a group and learn about what we're doing and the systems that we're using and the processes that we are adopting and kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. So that was probably the biggest lesson for me, was other than just learning about the weight room and lifting and just the differences between Australian football and American football and that side of it. I mean, the weight room, there's a lot of stuff going on there compared to Australia. Just in terms of the weight that's being lifted and all that kind of thing. But, generally speaking, it is similar things and, adopting the same techniques as you would from Australia to the US. But you obviously have to go in and realize that you know nothing about the culture that they have and that you know nothing about the sport really compared to what they do. So just listen, don't be obnoxious and kind of go with the flow. So that was kind of what I went with.
So for people listening, they'll hear the job title, Director of Performance Science at the Eagles. Obviously a big title, big organizations, very glamorous. Why go home? Why go back to Oz?
Yeah, I mean, to put it simply, like I didn't last, so like I survived a few coaching changes, throughout my career, but the last coaching change I didn't, and then was really looking after a new role. And it kind of simultaneously happened at a time that we were interested in moving home anyway. So, my son is just turning 6, he's starting school. We'd always kind of talked about when he starts school that we would come back to Australia and do schooling in Australia and kind of set ourselves up. So it did just coincide with that at the same time. But I also got really, really fortunate talking with Ben at Hawkin Dynamics and it just kind of all fell into place perfectly. We're, now that I'm working for them, like we're expanding rapidly and having some feet on the ground in this like Asia Oceania region is huge for us. So I just sometimes things just happen to work out perfectly, and it has. And I've kind of lived my life with that calculated risk. That was the whole movement to America in the first place, was kind of, hey, make some calculated risk in your life. And, if you have a fallback, have a fallback. But if you don't take the risk at all, you'll never, some things will never happen. You'll regret it. You only got one life. So that's kind of what we've been through the whole time, is like, all right, let's move to Philadelphia and see what happens. It's just that's the reason why for the move back. And couldn't be happier, to be honest.
Nice, mate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 2017 was a Super Bowl win?
2017 season, yep. 2018 was the win.
Yes. Okay. I'd love to dive into that because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think... No, we haven't had anyone who's got that accolade in under their cap.
Wow.
Super Bowl winner. So yeah, I'd love to dive into that. I'm be honest with you, it's not a sport that I know tons about. Obviously, massive respect the athleticism and all that kind of comes with it, but it's never something, probably because of the time zone. I'm not saying it's staying up till 2 and to watch, but I'd love to dive into just what that was like what made that staff, what made that group of players come together to be able to achieve that in that particular season.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously listened to your podcast a fair bit, and a lot of people talk about process, and I think, you can say it 1,000 times and it gets really boring, but it really was the process, and it kind of built. I came in with Chip Kelly, and and an extraordinary staff. James Harris was the chief of staff, and then like Sean Hulls and Josh Hengst were kind of sports science, strength conditioning coach as well. And I kind of came in with those two guys, as well as the rest of the staff who were really, really knowledgeable at the same time. And they kind of already created a culture over a couple of years, of, Chip was huge into sports science. He brought me over to Oregon as well. And so there was this really great culture from a sports science standpoint, already, not to mention other sides of thing of leadership and style of coaching and how to communicate with each other, and all those different aspects. And then, once Chip had left and they brought Doug Peterson in, they actually kept basically a whole bunch of staff, all the position coaches, almost all of them. And it really just kept that cultural train going. And that was honestly something I loved about Oregon as well, was they, like, so many position coaches have been there for over 20 years. Some of the staff have been there 30 plus, and you could feel the difference in the rooms when you had people that have been there for that long. And you obviously don't want to, not have a growth mindset and be stale in your approach and all those things. But if you get the right people who are continue to grow, and they review themselves and try and get better each year, and you can see that, like, the deliberate act of improvement, then why not keep those people on? You're going to have ebbs and flows in performance, but, like, can you have sustained performance, I guess, is the key part there. I've gone on a tangent, but
No.
I think that I got really lucky to begin with. Chip had actually introduced me to the playing group, as well, and whenever the head coach is introducing you or saying something, he would go and dive in the ice bath after practice. And so, he dives in the ice bath with all the players. And so, that the next time you have a conversation about recovery protocols with a guy, that they're going to listen to you. And so he introduced me as, like, we handpicked him from Australia, like, he's here with us. And so that just goes to your credibility, like, if you're trying to sell something, like, you want to build rapport and you want that person to feel like you're an expert straight away. And so that really just did it off the bat. So, it all started with the process kind of 2015, and then kind of carried on through. So, Doug definitely brought a different feeling to the locker room and to the playing group, as well. And, it just kind of built from there. And it's just more of the process of kind of building from step by step, getting the right recruits in, having the right leadership group in, and kind of building, kind of brick by brick, as boring as that sounds. But I guess one of the things that, I think that set that year apart was we kind of had the term grey man, for kind of those second to third year players. And if you look, like, grey man theory is about, when stuff hits the fan, people, mold into the background, and they're the ones that kind of just keep working and keep doing what they're supposed to do, and you don't really notice them. We kind of use that terminology, as these are the people that keep our team connected and culturally primed. And so what I mean by that is more, there was communication between both sides of the ball, so offense and defense, communication from special teams and, the different groups, communication of leaders, getting guys in and keeping them accountable. Are you lifting? Are you not lifting? Like, what programming you're doing? Are you talking to your coaches? Are you in the meetings? Are we doing dinners and staying in contact with each other? This group of second and third string players that really just set the tone for the rest of the team. They're obviously really hard to find in a big number, but we had a big number of them. And that's what made that year really special. The staff was incredible, all those things. There was just a building over multiple years of just, like, great people. But then the last piece was the players themselves. I mean, there was such a tight group in between different position groups within the team itself that really made that year special. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've gone through it recently. Excuse me, here in the UK with the England football team getting to the final of the Euros, and there's this outward-facing togetherness of the players, and that's clearly been created by the people behind the scenes, and people have been on the podcast. Bryce Kavanagh, obviously, fellow Aussie, and the English guys as well, to create that culture. And culture gets that word kind of gets thrown around a lot. And I'd be interested to know from a staffing point of view how you facilitated that communication, that togetherness, that camaraderie amongst the players, which pulled everyone together, which pushed everything forward. Just is there anything that you guys did specifically to kind of foster that, or was it just the characters of the players that just a really good fit at that particular time?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you can do for that. I don't know if we were, as deliberate as what we could have been, but we were deliberate on who we brought into the building. So, like our process of like recruiting players into the program was very diligent on what their reporting had been from different colleges and different people, different pro teams, and people they have met and their family. So the notes taken on each of the players was very thorough, and so that in itself really led to having those types of players in the building and making sure they were there, and then keeping them as well. So kind of being deliberate in which players that we kept, to make sure that we were maintaining great people, and not getting, too concerned with like the actually quality of the player on the field, but being more concerned with who the person was. Obviously, have to perform, but can we wrap them with the tools necessary for that to happen? Um, but at the same,
Sorry to interrupt, James.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, mate. Was that the same? Was that the same with the staff as well? Were you as diligent with the staff that you brought in, or was it that staff from 2015 that had kind of moved with you and developed together?
uh, it was a combination of both. So there was still a bunch of staff
Okay.
who were there in 15, who were still there in 17, and there was obviously some other staff that had been brought in as well. So I do think the continuity of having the staff from that time definitely made a huge impact on the players' trust with the coaching staff as well, the communication between the coaching staff and the players. It's hard if you try and change staff every 2 years to gain, like, how do you communicate? How do you know who likes what and which players are what they're going through? And but we made a particular, you know, uh, in 2015 we did everything under the sun, and I'm just talking performance side. Like, we did everything under the sun in terms of sports science and testing, and I had a great time in terms of like what I learned in that year. I mean, we were doing Amiga Wave every day. We were doing like way in, way out with scales that just talk to the cloud, and USG every day, questionnaires, all these things. We were doing a thousand things a day, and having all these data points. And I think what we learned that year was we've collected way too much, and we're looking at the computer way too much, and we need to
Okay.
disseminate this information down, or filter that down into some smaller chunks, and let's actually talk to people. So we kind of went back in the shadows a little bit from that point in terms of our testing with the players, but we were really methodical about what we actually chose to do. And I think that was kind of the same across the board for all different departments, whether that be like football tech or coaching. It was really a pare down, but a pare down in the best sense. We went from, okay, we need 100 data points to make a decision on someone, to, oh, let's use 10 and get 99.9% of the way there. So that was really the crux for us, was finding that balance between, oh man, your sleep's really poor. Um, let's make sure we give him like some dream water tonight, to, hey, why is your sleep poor? If we chose sleep as something that was needed to be discussed, and it's like, well, I've just had my kid. I've like, it's 2 weeks old. I haven't been asleep for like 3 weeks. So
I feel you.
yeah, so that's kind of how I would say that the culture for our staffing groups changed. It got a little more refined in the approach. So not necessarily different people, but the actual like skill sets and the processes that we had got more refined.
Nice little segue there into the sports tech monitoring sports science side of things. So what got binned? What was the excess that you chopped off that you didn't need when you'd potentially over-egged it in them first couple of years to slim it down? And why did them decisions get made?
Yeah, I think rather than naming like individual companies, I hate to do that.
Yeah.
I think it was more about, how do we have the least amount of footprint on the players from a testing and monitoring standpoint? How do we make a testing is training and training is testing, methodology, methodology, and then how are we going to collect that and make decisions off of it? Is obviously the last part. And, for us, it was more about, okay, what has a really big footprint that's, and I don't know if we did this exactly. We probably did, but it was, this one has a huge footprint. What are we getting out of it? This one has a really small footprint. We get a lot out of it. And just really, we did go through a whole list of things that we were currently doing and utilizing. But we really is like, okay, what is going to give us, obviously the biggest bang for the buck is the saying, in terms of reporting and sometimes and for people that haven't got a giant budget like the Eagles, there's some things that are really simple and easy that give you a huge bang for buck, like RPE, right? Like there's things that you can do that give you a huge, a huge tool that's inexpensive and that you can get a big carry out from. So that was kind of our process through that, and it worked for us. We obviously found GPS really important for us for the majority of players. I think for the linemen, it was okay. But then, we found force plates really important for us, not only for like neuromuscular fatigue, but then also for, recruiting and for power output across the year and looking at, how things trend with our like programming. Are we getting what we want from strength or power or speed / velocity? And so it's more about like, okay, what are the 3 or 4 things that we really, really value and we really utilize and that we can explain to the players and explain to the coaches to make a difference. And then I would say wrapped in all that would be just how we went about our planning and preparation, because I think that was probably the part that, we needed to get better at, and we did, over those first couple of years was more like, okay, we know that injuries happen on these days of training camp. So let's plan our periodization of training camp so that those injuries don't happen on those days. We have all this data, we've collected it all. So let's just use that in our planning and preparation, and the rest of it will take care of itself. You don't need to be reactive to what's going on because you've already like anticipated or planned for it. So that was probably the big stuff, in terms of sitting down with Doug and going through, or Coach Peterson, and going through kind of the planning and periodization time, like of training camp and practices, and what are we anticipating, and kind of go from that workflow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of that, at the point where you're making or reflecting and then therefore making decisions, was any feedback from players and from coaches to say you're taking too much of these guys, or was it very much an internal staff, I think we're taking too much from these guys and we need to strip things back?
No, it was definitely both. It was definitely both. It came
Okay.
from both angles. Like we had a couple of players just like, this is, I mean, it was insane. 2015 was insane. And so it was really, we did a whole exit interview with all the players on all the departments. What do you like, what don't you like, and we read everything. So kind of learning about what they had thought is incredibly important. And we want them to buy in as much as as much as anything. So if they don't buy into testing or screening or how we're going about our business, then we're not going to get the information that we want either. So but then in terms of like, we also wanted to make it a place that was fun too. So we don't want to make it make it feel like a lab. That's why you have the coffee, we had a coffee machine back in our area. So, and couches. So guys would come and sit, have a coffee, you talk about life and you learn more about people. I think that's probably what I've really, really enjoyed about, and maybe it's just getting older, but just the stories of people and where they've come from and what they've been through their life and how that's impacted what they're doing now. I think we can all learn more from other people and kind of put our walls down and learn about each other. And I think people will be surprised about the impact of that, that you can have on other people's lives and they can have on yours at the same time. So without getting too deep and emotional, I do think there's definitely, that's a side of sports science that I didn't realize coming out of college or university. That's exceedingly important, especially when you get into the business and the politics that go along with it.
See, another thing that we spoke about off air about the trends that come through our industry and pass by, and then something else comes along, and communication is definitely one that we're in the thick of, improving communication. Now, that little excuse me, that little example there of just sitting down on a couch and having a coffee with someone, how hard is that to actually do? Because do you have to be the right person to be able to do that? Like, that seems pretty simple and seems to, by the sounds of it, have an incredible bang for buck given the time that you put in versus the output that you get out and the understanding of these characters and these personalities. To me, and this is me going around it in a trying to be nice as possible, I don't need to spend £1,000 to go on a course to be able to learn to sit down and have a coffee and chat to someone and listen. But is it as simple as that? Or were you doing other things on that side to get to know these players?
Yeah, I think, I think some people innately have that skill, right? Some people do have that skill to be able to listen really well. I wouldn't say I'm the best listener, but I do try and actively listen. I think others continue to talk and not listen at all, and would probably benefit from a course learning how to actually listen. But with that said, like I think that's the difference between different players too, right? Or different staff members. We did some work on kind of personality typing and how you connect with different people of different personalities and what annoys people of this personality and what ways to talk to people in certain circumstances, if you catch my drift. And I think that's the same with players is, and this is the beauty about having a diverse staff. I think, it's really important that you have a diverse staff because people are going to gravitate to different people. And that's just the reality of life. And, you have some players who are unbelievable work ethic, who, you have to actually tell them to go home because they're just doing everything possible. They're watching film on couches. They're doing extra lifting. They're watching film while they're lifting. You know what I mean? So I think, then you have other players who are just gifted, who can get away with, in loose terms. Like if they actually applied themselves like you want them to apply themselves, they'd be the best. But, they can get away with what they can. And so it's more about like, how do you fit different people with different players and coaches with different players and coaches with different staff? Because everyone has different relationships and kind of learning that, that side of things and checking the ego at the door, realizing that like you're not the only person who can talk to anyone. It's not a hierarchy and you're not going to get disciplined for talking to a player that's not in your group or whatever. We had one of our staff members work out a player at like 5:30 in the morning because that player wanted to have some one-on-one time and trusted him and didn't want other people to, watch what he was doing. Great. If that relationship's, solid and they were going out to dinner and doing other stuff, they learned about each other and their lives and they became really close. And he was a huge player for us in that Super Bowl year. So I think, regardless of who's talking to who and just, have diversity in your staff. And make the best person connect with the person that you need to. And so I think that's kind of a lesson I've definitely learned from the communication side of things the last few years.
Them exit interviews, I'm really interested to just touch on that a little bit as well. Yeah. Was that something that was done every year? Did you struggle to get players to be as honest as you wanted them to be? Or were they went for it straight away? And would you do that again? Would you continue to do that? Would you encourage others to do those types of interviews post-season?
100%. I mean, a lot of that came from like the GM. And so, we, as each department, weren't privy to others' departments, which I think is great. And so, it was more about feedback for us as a group. and learning what the players think of us and what we need. And I think the directive from like the GM and the owner were be as honest as you want because you want to make high level decisions on these guys, which is great. I think that's and if we're taking care of our business in terms of doing after action reviews and being really methodical in our approach, then that will come across in that anyway. So I would definitely recommend it. I think learning what the players' opinion are of different people and different groups is incredibly important in building that kind of robustness with each other. I think one thing that was, noticeably absent when I came to the US and just speaking to different teams, different people from different teams, was kind of the lack of their own review within departments themselves. So that was something that I took a lot of pride in was, hey, here's our end of season report. It's about nutrition. It's about, injury rates. It's about, our strength numbers and like basically every facet of our, what's touching the players and how do we get there. Our player development program and rookie success program, reviewing all these areas and then, what needs to change, what needs to stay, and then how can we get better? Kind of the one up, one forward mentality. And I think that was, for me personally, is like you don't know where you're going unless you know what you've done. So let's kind of figure that out so we can move forward and grow and get better. And so that to me were kind of the yes, I would definitely do reviews. I'm a big review guy.
So post 2017, what constraints were in place after that? What challenges did you have after that to go again? I know that's super hard given the system being obviously so different to over here. But yeah, what challenges were in place that didn't allow you to kick on again?
Yeah, I think expectation lifts, right? Like and that's just the reality is we're it's not successful if you don't win it again. And sustained success is incredibly hard. I think we had the right pieces in place, but there was a lot of adversity in the 2017 year. We had a lot of injuries, especially late, which was unfortunate. So the surgeries all ran late. We basically had a bunch of guys still in rehab. I think it was 15 or something. 15 or 20 still in rehab leading into the next training camp. So, that was definitely a huge toll. And it just depends. There's so many factors that go into it. It's, do you continue to recruit? Do you have the cap space? Have you done the best from a performance standpoint? Have you done the best from a medical standpoint? There's so many interconnecting layers there that, we obviously didn't do it right because we didn't win the Super Bowl again. But we also made playoffs the next 2 years as well. So I think it's also about tempering expectations at the same time. Like what is success and can it be sustained over a long period of time? But you have to have the right players as well and the right group as well. So yeah, definitely a multifaceted approach. I think there's obviously failings in every department, which is part of it, right? That's you gotta take up and own. And I know that as a department, like we obviously didn't do what we needed to do to the maximum, and I would think that the rest of the departments would do the same thing and put their hand up.
I want to dig into a little bit of the weeds into the sports science system that you helped create around that time, pre then and obviously post as well. What were the key facets of that program that allowed you to get that success? And I read a little bit of a piece. I can't remember which player it was. I think it was a player that had come injured, maybe hadn't particularly got over that injury. But one of the quotes was that he'd joined you guys because of the reputation that the sports science department had. And so I just wanted to get to know a little bit more about kind of what you were doing and the real successes that you feel that you had in that department. And we've had a little chat around some of the things like filtering things out and being very methodical in the kind of information that you did collect. But just maybe a little bit more, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a big question. I think I think we had we had a really great connection between the staff. myself, like Josh Hengst, Sean Hulls, and then you had like Keith Gray, Ben Wagner, Mike Minnis is our nutritionist, and Patrick McDowell. And just as a small unit, we were really, really tight. We go to dinners together, and like we knew our families, and I think that was on display in terms of how we communicated professionally. So we were really open and honest with our programming, and what we wanted to achieve, but then also what we thought. And Josh did a great job. He was a head strength coach he was so collaborative that you could basically just pull apart a program and say, like, this doesn't work with this is not what we aim for. They would pull me apart and say, like, we're not testing them, that's stupid, makes no sense practically. And then Sean was the same. You could say something about how our program was in general, what direction we were going, and kind of our play development program that we had going as well. So everyone was really open and honest, which I think carries over to the players more than people would expect. So like an example of that, if we get into the weeds of it, is every 4 weeks we would literally write down what was positive, what can we get better at, other notes, and then anything that was particularly great that you want to mention. And really just kind of we went through that as a staff every single 4 weeks. And how did that last block go? What can we learn from it? Would you do the same exercises again? Would you do the same reps and sets? Did you like how we were specific with these different people? How was that testing protocol? Did the information come out fast enough? All those things, right? So like going through every single facet, like, our compliance has gone down on our recovery shakes and on our supplements. So going through all these different areas and being like really, really diligent with talking to players and making sure that we were staying up on that stuff. But being as our staff, like once we walked out of those meetings every 4 weeks, we all knew the direction we were going. We all knew what our pain points were and how to get better. So yeah, that was I guess a really key part was just the connectiveness of our group as a smaller team. And then from a sports science principle standpoint, I've never believed in like the golden ticket, right, or the golden number that's going to show us that someone's flagging or there's an issue. And it's just staying up on latest research and doing reading. And then the non-sexy part of sports science is data management and cleaning of data and outliers, which is really boring. But that's the part that's really, really important, probably the most important. And I think from that point, I really enjoy kind of a multi-layered approach. That's like if we're just talking about, say, we're talking about distance covered, right? Just like a training volume. You can just say volume. I kind of like to have different layers that are all integrated with each other. So, okay, you have a position group of 10. What are we expecting using historical data? What are we expecting for this practice today or this week? What did they actually achieve? What's the percentage breakdown of the position group per player? What were we expecting? So maybe someone had 20% of the volume. Well, they were meant to have 10%. That's way higher, but their actual volume wasn't that much different. Let's use acute chronic. Let's use monotony and strain. Let's use MBI, and kind of go through like all the different markers that we might have, and then let's look at it all together. And then at the very end, just use common sense. So I think that was kind of my approach with the numbers themselves was I want to look at all the information like monotony and strain. Yeah, that's great for like 7 days. That's fantastic. Acute chronic, okay, it's getting slammed with the research right now, but I think people are using that forever anyway, of just looking at this week versus other weeks, like what they look like. It's important to be particular with the research and understand it, but then when you're applying it practically, like it's okay to use something that isn't exactly scientific. Like sometimes you just need to know some general information about something. And so, yeah, for me, it was also well, we've seen historically this guy can't do more than 4,000 yards. Like his body is really sore. Anecdotally, he says so. So let's cap him at 4,000 yards. When he goes over that, then we have a problem. So I think it was more about, how do we look at certain data points and have a multi-stage approach of looking at that, and then try and do that timely enough that we can get the information out really quickly. So yeah, I guess that just into my mindset is more of being complex with a really simple number. And kind of we talked about before about having 100 data points to make a decision versus 10. I guess I'm also talking about having, rather than having 100 different protocols or testing types, maybe you only have one testing type, but you look at 10 variables really deeply. So it goes back to that footprint on the player of, let's not have a huge footprint on player, but let's try and be really complicated, or not complicated, but really like decipher the information that we are getting from that, and trying to make really informed decisions. But don't be locked into like one way of looking at things. Try and spread your mind out, and it's okay to not know exactly what the numbers are going to tell you, and make just a common sense informed decision at the same time.
You've mentioned the word or the phrase common
Sorry.
sense a couple of times. No, it's good. It's good. It's great. I want you to just dive a little bit deeper on that. Are we a little bit, or can we get a little bit too hung up on making sure everything is in a box and links to a research paper, and we kind of cover our own back that we're doing a certain thing because it's been done there, when actually a little bit of common sense would suggest that we can actually do this. It's not in any research paper, but I just know that I think that's the way to do it, because I've just got this intuition, and I've been around the players, I've been around the staff, we have good conversations. I'm thinking we stick with this.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like that's the art of coaching, right? Like coaches have been doing that forever, intuition, and most of the time they're right. So I always thought the sports science side of things, like the numbers really, you should know 90% of what they're already telling you. It's the 10% that kind of that you can use it for and make like really big decisions out of it. I think end of the day, like the common sense should prevail. And research papers, look, it's awesome. You can gain so much insight about new techniques and understanding information differently, understanding how to apply it. But at the end of the day, that research wasn't done at your place, with your culture, with your team, with your coach. So unless it was you, obviously, but most of the time it's not. So that to me is like, your team and your staff better, and you guys should make your own decisions. And use research to back it up. But a lot of the time, if you're in pro sport, you're also pushing the boundary as well. So the research that you're looking at is 3 or 4 years old, and you're hopefully being a trendsetter. So do things differently, and try and apply it the best you can, because that's really you're trying to make just informed decisions. You're not in the research game. You're in the performance game, and unfortunately, you're on a knife's edge the whole time anyway. So. You're going for peak performance. You might fall over off one side. Hopefully you don't. But injuries are going to happen. That's part of the game.
We've been on 45 minutes, and I've made a note right at the start, because I want to make sure I get to it. And it's a little bit uncomfortable, so please tell me if it's a no-go zone. But I've never really spoke to anyone about being let go from an organisation.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of an insight? Because it's something that gets there's a rumbling underneath on social media, on conversations that are going on, but it's there and it's real, and it's the job that you guys do at the high end, knowing that things can be taken away from you by something that you do or something that you don't do. So would you give it a bit of an insight into that process? Obviously, you don't have to go into the finer details of what that, I don't know, settlement or agreement looks like, but just going through that as a person, what was that like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't think I've been asked that before. I think it's definitely you kind of define yourself as that role, right? Like I define myself as a performance person. And so when you kind of get that call, when you realize it's not going to happen, I still love my work and what I do, and I'm really, really lucky that I've hit the ground running, which is great. But it's definitely, you also, and I would say 95% of people in this business have already planned for their exit anyway. I mean, the NFL stands for not for long. So that you're going to be out at some point soon.
I love
And
that. I love that.
that's definitely stolen. That's not my thing. No. So you have an exit plan. Now, we didn't have a COVID exit plan, that's for sure. But I couldn't be any more like gracious and humble for working for Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they treated me and my wife and the family incredibly across the time. And this is pro sport. I mean, that's part of the game. Like, you have to realize that when you're getting into pro sport, that we're all a part of that. And I truly believe, and I think if you ask people there, that my performance wasn't the reason why I was let go. It was just there's different circumstances that happen. New head coach comes in. That's just part of the industry. So, it's not ideal. no one wants to finish their contract if you don't want it to. But you also have to look at it in a way of like, what's the next challenge and how you're going to attack it. I definitely didn't sit there and sit in the corner and kind of cried tears of misery and why me and all this other stuff. It was like, wow, okay, great. What's next? Like, let's go. We got some more challenges to hit, and let's go home. Tell the wife, like, we'll figure this out. There's we got plenty of time and options, and we'll make some calls. And I think that's part of what's so important in this business is like talking to people and like don't. I probably shouldn't say this, but like, don't be a dickhead. Just be a good person, and if you are good at your job and you treat people correctly, that you will land your feet. So I think it's just really important that if there's younger people listening that are getting into the business, realize that it could finish in 1 year. I mean, I got really lucky. 2015, Chip left at that end of that year. I could have been gone after 1 year. And I really didn't have much of a backup plan. So I was only lucky that after those few years, I had a backup plan properly. Well, not a backup plan, but I had an exit strategy from the US at least. So I think it's definitely, it's not easy at the time, but it's also, you just have to flick that mindset of good, all right, let's go.
Next challenge, let's crack on.
Yeah, and I think most people would be the same. I think if you talk to anyone else who's been in a similar situation, and the Eagles were fantastic to us too. I mean, we ended up staying in the US, and we had our third child over there, and they were extremely, just with COVID and all that stuff. I cannot thank that organization more for what they did for us. So, and across the whole time, I mean, Jeffrey Laurie, the owner, he is a sensational person. And a sensational leader in that community. And so, I can't thank the organization enough. I mean, I had six, 7 great years, which is more than a lot of people can last. So, I'm really grateful for the whole opportunity. And I think if you have that mindset of, you're just holding that seat for someone else. Someone else is in it before you, and someone is going to be in it after you. You're like, it's not. You talk about, the All Blacks, and what they talk about is, you're wearing that jersey at the moment, but there's a legacy. It's the same thing. Every sport has a legacy. There's coaches before, coaches after. So you're warming the seat for the next person to come in.
Just to go another layer down, again, feel free to stop me. The process of you getting let go, or told you're going to get let go, is that a phone call? Because given what you've just said about how good they were with you, it almost sounds like it's a bit of, you weren't booted out of the door. Like, you're terrible, off you go, see you later. It sounded a bit, it wasn't your fault, but we've kind of got to do this because this is how it goes. Really sorry, but this is what's going to happen. Am I right in thinking that's how it kind of played out?
Yeah, I think I was
Yeah.
definitely in a different situation to other people. I think that's one thing.
Mm.
Everyone's going to have their own story with that. For me, it was, um, and I mean, if it wasn't, it was. We don't need to really get into this, I guess, but like the fact it's a phone call wasn't really a big deal since it was we're in COVID and it was a different circumstance.
Of course.
So I
Yeah.
think there's some other things there that it would have happened differently. But I truly believe that because I try and be a good person that uh, and I have I guess a different mindset with it that and it wasn't it was there was so many there's multi factors into it. It was more about we're not extending your contract further or getting a new contract than it was like we're going to fire you right today and like walk out the
Mm.
door and leave. So there's some different circumstances around, and I'm sure each person would be different with that as well.
Cool. I like it. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask because it's something I've never asked before. So many people have gone through it, but it never really gets talked about. So I'm obviously really appreciate you sharing that. So why the transition? And you said you had a bit of a plan or a little bit of an exit strategy. Why choose to go from an applied on the ground with players to more the sports tech commercial side? I mean, it's something that I've obviously never made it to the dizzy heights of the NFL, but that was my strategy to get into the commercial side because I enjoyed it. But is that something that you've always had as a plan? Because you have thought it'd be something that would fit your personality, your character, or just something that happened?
Yeah, I think it's kind of both, I guess.
Mm,
I think it's always been something that I've thought that I would excel at, and that I thought that I just would really enjoy if I got the right group of people or the right company to work for. And so when I talked to Ben, and he's the CEO of Hawkins, um, it was just such a great fit that it just any other offers or anything came up just didn't make sense, and it just ended up being perfect. So like not only is the company fantastic, like the people are fantastic, the technology is great, and I've used it myself, and so it's just there's just a bunch of different things there that just made it like a job that's too good to be true. And just as you talked about earlier, like having my son starting school and wanting to start in Australia, I mean, all the things just honestly just lined up. So, um, I it also kind of got to the point too where it, elite sport and pro sport, uh, your resume just goes from place to place, right? Like there's a point where okay, how do you want your lifestyle to look, and
mm,
how do you want your family to remember you at the same time? So, like, do I always want to be, you know, the NFL was particularly taxing in terms of hours. Like you're there at 6, you're there till 10. Like it's long days. So like
mm.
there's some time in the off season you have off and you have some great time, but there's also like when you're on, you're on. Um, and if I was to be a performance director somewhere, then you're just as busy and crazy. If you work in soccer or football or whatever sport you work in, your hours are going to be insane. Now, don't get me wrong, competition is fantastic. Like I love winning, and I hate losing. So I love that side of it. But I definitely am really excited to. I think a lot of it for me was this is definitely a new challenge, and I'm really excited about starting something new and having a new challenge and sinking my teeth into it and seeing how I go. More than I'm not going to work in elite sport. Like, that's not my mindset's not like that. It's like this is a really cool challenge. It has really good people. Like the tech is awesome. Um, I've used it myself. I know how valuable it can be. This is perfect. Like let's attack this with everything I've got, and I get to look after a whole region like of Asia and Oceania, and take care of it, and be just someone to bounce ideas off with my experience, and be someone to lean on. And really, I get to be an applied sports scientist for a bunch of people now, which is amazing. So yeah, like I literally want to be, hey, give me a call. Give me a call. Let's talk about it and go through it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I was so excited to talk to you is just, I've never done a podcast before. And I've been kind of in the shadows, which has been great. Yeah, no, it's just fun to talk about this stuff. And I've got no problem talking about, I got let go or didn't get extended. Great. People should learn about what it's like. It's actually really important. Like, you're going into this industry of pro sports, it is going to happen to you at some point. So I've got no problem talking about it because it is going to happen to you. Get ready for it. Have some emergency funds waiting for you so you can last a few months, especially if you've got kids and family and whatnot. So yeah, I guess that's the thing I'm most excited about, is just the next challenge and really like having fun with this and getting after it.
Love it. Well, thank you for coming out of the background and having a little chat. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it. No, thanks, mate. Well, I know you say you're not a big social media guy, but are you active anywhere? Can people keep in touch with what you've got going on, or is that going to increase given the new role? Maybe
That's
not.
a great question.
Yeah.
I did start. No, I mean, yeah, I'm not a big social media guy. I kind of,
Yeah.
I kind of take things, just as they come. You can definitely reach me at my email, which is james@hawkindynamics.com. I'm also free to do consulting work as well. I have started my own business off the side at the same time. So that's Hanisch Performance Consulting. If you want to reach out and talk about kind of experience of NFL or American sport and play development processes and all those kind of things, I'm definitely available to do that. And my experience in sports science and the application of it. So they're kind of the two areas. But in terms of social, I kind of stay clear.
Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. Stay strong.
Yeah, no.
Stay strong. Right, mate. Well, I'm going to let you crack on with your evening, but thank you very much for giving it your time. It's been a great conversation, and I really appreciate your honesty and allowing me to dive into the little bits that may certainly found me uncomfortable. It obviously was water for ducks back for you, clearly, but thanks very much, mate. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, of course.
Thanks,
Yep.
mate. Speak
Thanks.
soon.